Mate, we just filmed a video about shorter cranks, so here we are filming a video about longer cranks.
Yeah.
Again, this is a topic that I get asked surprisingly frequently. When should you consider going above 175 millimeter cranks? So look, the typical commercially available stuff is 165 up to 175, and I don't think that you can actually get Shimano or SRAM cranks in above 175. So we've only got a 10 millimeter range from the two major manufacturers, which is not a lot when you consider that some people are 5'1" and other people are 6'8". So the range of leg lengths is massive compared to the range of crank lengths that are commercially available. And obviously the large manufacturers just have to produce cranks for the middle people in the bell curve, and the people at the very bottom and the people at the very top tend to struggle. So when should you consider going to longer cranks? Now by longer I mean above 175. So this is these are the cranks that you get up in 180, 185, 195, and I've seen a couple of 200 millimeter cranks over the years. When should you consider this? Now these people need to satisfy a couple of criteria. They tend to be very specific criteria, and I'll run you through them now. The number one is if your seat height is up over 800 or 820 millimeters, measured from the center of the crank up to the top of the seat, you should start considering cranks above 175. That's kind of a good range. If you've got a seat height of like 850 or 870 or up near 900 millimeters, I think my personal seat height record is 912 millimeters for a really tall rider that we had a few years ago who was from, I think he was from the Netherlands. These riders do really well with 185, 195 millimeter cranks. So the taller, the longer your legs are and the taller you are, the more likely it is that this is going to be a good thing. So that's the obvious one. The second one, if you tend to like turning a big gear at low cadence. So if you're self-selecting when you're riding a cadence of below about 80 or 75 even, and you find that that's your sweet spot of efficiency in a zone 2, zone 3, zone 4 load, this is a good indicator that you might do well with longer cranks if you've also got the seat height stuff going on and the next one we're going to talk about. So the more of these you tick, the more likely it is that you'll do well with really long cranks. So if you like a low cadence, and this typically means that you're going to be a really muscularly, heavily built rider, which is our next thing we'll talk about. But if you like turning over a big tall gear at low RPM, because it gives you a better sense of on-saddle stability, better sense of efficiency, that sort of stuff, this is a good reason to consider shorter cranks as well. So there will be people out there listening to this thinking, but surely if you're spinning your legs too slow, that can also mean that you want shorter cranks, right? But to increase the cadence. So this one is a caveat or like an offshoot of the first thing that we just mentioned, which is if you've got really long legs and you have big legs and you like turning the cadence really slowly, you've got to satisfy more of these criteria than just one. So if you've got a 650 millimeter seat height and your cadence is down at 70 all the time, you don't want to go to longer cranks, you want to go to shorter ones. So you need to satisfy the first couple of criteria before you can get to this one. But that's the second one. Now the third one, which is the biggest predictor I find apart from seat height, is if you are a really big heavy set rider. And so what happens is if you've got significant muscle mass in your legs are very heavy. If you're a 120 kilogram guy who's 6'5", each one of your legs may weigh 30 to 40 kilos. They're very heavy. What happens when they're whipping around through the pedal stroke? There is a huge amount of inertia as the legs whip up and down and move around because of the excessive weight in your legs from all the muscle mass. This inertia tends to transfer itself up further along your kinetic chain, which basically makes you bounce on the saddle. So big heavy set guys with huge heavy legs, one of the reasons that they like to turn the cranks slowly is because if they turn them fast, they bounce too much because of the inertia of their legs. So the heavier your legs are, the more trouble you have at very high cadence because of this reason. So if you go to shorter cranks under those circumstances, sometimes you just literally won't be able to spin them fast enough because you'll bounce around on the saddle too much. So this is an interesting problem. And if, again, you've got to have a very high seat height, you've got to have that self-selected cadence down below about 75 or 80 RPM. But if you've also got big, heavy legs, this is another reason to do it. These guys tend to, because their body is geared and has evolved over the course of their lifespan to move at slower RPM because of their long limbs and their heavy muscle mass in their legs, they tend, in terms of walking and running, they tend to struggle with really high cadences. We've all ridden behind big, heavy set 110 kilo riders who are just grinding the gear out. One of the reasons that they self-select that is because their bodies are larger. They tend to move their legs at lower cadences, just a natural part of being how they are. And then conversely, you're really small, lean, lightly built people, we tend to move our legs at higher cadences because we have less leg inertia. So that's an interesting aside. So look, I've had riders using up to 200 millimeter cranks under these conditions. In particular, these people tend to be big, heavy set, powerful people with long legs that do really well, typically with 185s and 195s. So 200 mil cranks are quite rare. I think I've only had 2 or 3 over the years. These can be hard to get. The best place to get them is, last time I checked, there's a business in the United States called Zinn, Z-I-N-N, Zinn Cycles in the US, and I think they make their own cranks out to 200 mil, and they also stock other cranks from other manufacturers out in those lengths. But you will need to go to a boutique supplier, shall we say, because you can't get these from SRAM or Shimano. It has to be an aftermarket supplier. So those are the reasons to go with longer cranks, mate. So if you've got out there, you're ticking a lot of these boxes and you've never considered going above 175, it can be a surprising bonus to your performance. I think talking to Pete Jacobs, the world champion triathlete from 2017, 2012,
Kona.
At Kona. Pete used to, I think I had a conversation with him, he used to run 185s, and I think his seat height was up around that 790 or 800 millimeter mark.
He's only about 6 foot, he's not that tall.
Very long legs, long legs. But he actually found that he could turn them better, and he felt really, I remember having the conversation with him, he felt much better with, I believe, 185s back in the day. So yeah, it's not as much of a performance detriment as you'd think if you're a big heavy set guy. It can actually be a really, really good thing. So something to consider.
What if you're looking to go a little bit deeper though? If there's not enough information here, people are looking for a little bit more.
If there's not enough information, feel free to purchase our Bike Fit Fundamentals course. You'll see a link to that down below. That has a fair bit more information about crank length selection for individual riders in one of the modules, a very detailed explanation actually. If you're after more information about this, I highly recommend that resource.
Cool, thanks Neil.
No worries.